Welcome to this episode of Prairie People's Poetry, a spotlight series highlighting Saskatchewan spoken word artists through performances and conversations on the craft and community of the art form. I'm your host, Cat Abenstein, and today we're talking to poet, storyteller, spoken word artist, and workshop facilitator, Danica Lorer. I'm Danica Lorer. I am a poet and a writer and a workshop facilitator, but my heart is in storytelling. I've been an oral storyteller for more than 2 decades, and I am really grateful that I live in Saskatoon, Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis, because it's such an amazing place for story. It's a place where people have listened to and told stories since time immemorial. So it's a place where I call home. So 2 decades ago when you began, what started you on this journey of storyteller? Wow, I don't think back that often, that far. When I think about my history as a storyteller, I started out writing a little bit and working with kids, and I found that telling stories was a way to make connections with people. And when I started to get gigs as a storyteller, I was really surprised because I didn't think my stories were interesting enough for people to listen. And when people started to listen to me, I felt like there was not a burden, but a huge responsibility to have the sense that every minute that someone is listening to you, you have to respect that moment and you have to hold that with a sacred trust almost. And so it's always been something that's been really serious for me as a storyteller. I tell some silly, ridiculous kid stories, but I also tell some stories that come from deep in the heart of my memories and my imagination. So it's been a really interesting couple of decades. I was online chatting with one of my distant cousins in Chicago the other day, and we were talking about places we've traveled, and it was just sort of an idea that someday I want to go back to Chicago again. And so he was saying some of the recent places he'd been, and I had been to a couple of those places as a storyteller. And then I talked about dragging my kids all over Saskatchewan as a storyteller and how I go to conferences to meet with other storytellers and have this experience of this nation and this land and this space because I tell stories. So it's really kind of an interesting story, I suppose.
This is Zimmer's wish. It was Zimmer's birthday. She woke up early and she said, I wish. Every day for a month, she'd said, Daddy, all I want for my birthday is a pair of skates. Every time she saw her mom, she'd say, Mommy, I just want to play on the ice. So on her birthday, she woke up and she said, I wish. She ran down to the kitchen, and on the table was a box. It was the right shape for a pair of skates. It was the right size for a pair of skates. She lifted off the lid, and there they were, black and shiny with sparkling silver blades. She started to pull them on. Her mom said, Stop! You can't put skates on in the kitchen. You'll wreck the floor. Hurry up, eat your breakfast, and then you can run down to the arena to play with your friends. So she ate up her cereal. She drank the milk right out of the bowl. She ran down to the rink. She had skates and a helmet. And when she got there, her friend said, Zimmer, you finally got skates. Today, we're going to teach you how to play hockey. Well, she put on her helmet, tightened it up. She pulled on her skates and she tied up the laces. She stood up, and it felt kind of weird. She'd never been on skates before. She walked over to the gate, opened it up, and put one foot onto the ice. She started to slide. She put the other foot on and she started to wobble. She almost fell down, but then she stood up nice and tall. And then all of a sudden, her nose began to twitch. Her eyes began to itch. And achoo! And when she sneezed, fire shot out of her nose and melted some of the ice. And poor Zimmer was standing in a puddle, and you could see the cement underneath. And her friend said, Zimmer, you're sick. Go home. And she said, please, I'm not sick. I don't know why I sneezed. But she took off her helmet, and she took off her skates, and she started to walk slowly home, dragging her tail behind her. Now when she got home, her mom said, Zimmer, what are you doing home so soon? It's your birthday. You should be having fun with your friends. And she said, oh, Ma, I sneezed and fire shot out of my nose and I melted some of the ice and my friend said, you're sick. Go home. And her mom said, oh dear, do you have a fever? And she said, no, I feel fine. And her mom said, well, we better make a big pot of chicken noodle soup. And then her grandmother came over, and her grandmother said, if you feel like you are getting sick, you should eat raw garlic. So Zimmer ate handfuls of raw garlic. She drank bowl after bowl of chicken noodle soup and gallons of orange juice. And in a few days, she felt strong and healthy, and she ran back to the rink. When she got there, her friend said, Zimmer, are you better? And Zimmer said, I haven't sneezed in days. And they said, okay, today we're going to teach you how to play hockey. So they put on their helmets and tied up their skates and went back to the ice, and Zimmer started to sway again. She started to wobble. She found her footing, stood up straight, and then her eyes began to itch, and her nose began to twitch, and she went, ah, 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 achoo! And when she sneezed, fire shot out of her nose again and melted another patch in the ice. And her friend said, Zimmer, you're still sick. Go home. And she said, I'm not sick. I don't know why I sneezed. I haven't sneezed in days. And then one of her friends said, well, it's just a small spot. Why don't we put a pylon here? We'll go skate on the other side where there's lots and lots of nice smooth ice. So they started to skate along the boards. And they didn't get very far when Zimmer's eyes got really wide and her nose started to twitch. And she went, ah, ah, ah. But this time, one of her friends grabbed her by the nose and dragged her outside and said, Zimmer, you can't do this. You can't be here if you're sneezing. And she said, I don't know why I sneezed. And then another friend said, maybe you're not sick. Maybe you have an allergy. Maybe you're allergic to the ice. And she said, well, that's impossible. How could I be allergic to the ice? It's just frozen water. And they said, well, we'll find out if you're allergic to something here. And they started to sniff around the building. Do you smell that? That smells so good. Zimmer, do you smell the French fries? Are you allergic to French fries? And Zimmer said, no, I'm not allergic to French fries. I love dipping them in mayonnaise. And her friend said, oh, yuck. And they walked a little further into the rink. They walked down a hallway with a lot of doors. And they opened up one of the doors, and this great, big, awful stench started to come out of the room. And they looked in, and they could see a pile of jerseys and skates and hockey socks. And it was disgusting. And they said, Zimmer, are you allergic to the smell of stinky, sweaty hockey stuff? And she said, no. My brother plays soccer, and sometimes the van smells like that. So they sniffed around a little more. And Zimmer wasn't sneezing, so they went back to the ice. They got onto the ice, and then the big door at the back started to open. And a great big machine started to come towards them. And that big machine, chug, 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 and puffs of smoke were coming out of the top. And as soon as that machine came through that big door, Zimmer's eyes got really, really wide, and her nose started to twitch. And she went, ah, 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 ah. And a friend grabbed her by the nose again and said, Zimmer, you're allergic to the ice maintenance machine. You are allergic to the Zamboni. And she said, well, that's okay. Now we know what it is. They can just get rid of the big machine, and then I can play hockey. And they said, no, Zimmer. If we don't have the machine, none of us can play hockey. It makes the ice nice and smooth and safe. We need it. I guess you're not going to be able to play hockey after all. But that's okay, because it's only 7 months until spring, and we'll teach you how to play baseball. So Zimmer took off her helmet, and she took off her skates, and she started to walk slowly home, dragging her long, scaly tail behind her, dragging her long nose in front of her. She got partway home when a little bird flew over, and the little bird said, Zimmer, 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 what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And Zimmer said, I'm allergic, and I can't play hockey. And the little bird said, well, we'll find a way. We'll find a way. We'll find a way for you to play. And Zimmer said, it's impossible. I'm just going to go home, and I'm going to hibernate. And the little bird said, no, I have an idea. I have an idea. I have an idea. Follow me, follow me, follow me. And the little bird flew through town and through some trees. And on the other side of the trees was a pond. And that pond had frozen as smooth as a mirror. And Zimmer took one look and said, I'm not skating on there. That's too dangerous. At the arena, there was cement under the ice, but here, it's just frozen water. Somebody could fall in. Somebody could get really badly hurt. I can't do it. And the little bird said, well, why don't you just try on the edge, where the water was shallow? And then if you sneeze, it's not going to hurt anybody. So Zimmer put on her helmet and made sure it was tight. She pulled on her skates and tied them up, and she started to skate very slowly, just along the edge of the pond. And then she fell down, but she got back up again, and the little bird flew back to the arena and said, hey, everybody, Zimmer's skating on the pond. Let's teach her how to play hockey. And so they grabbed the nets and the pucks and the sticks, and they came back and they found her falling and getting back up again. And they taught Zimmer how to skate forwards and back, how to hold a stick, how to shoot that puck, how to pass. They played all afternoon. They played until the sun was starting to go down and the sky was turning bright pink. And Zimmer had one more wish. Zimmer wished that she could score a goal. And Zimmer had the puck. And then she heard, hey, Zimmer, supper. And she said, oh, Mom, just 5 more minutes. Because she was moving forward. She was skating her hardest. She could see that 2 of her friends were playing defense, and 1 of her friends was playing goal. And they were like a wall in front of the net. Well, Zimmer was skating forward a little bit faster. She was getting closer and closer, and that wall looked like she'd never get past it when all of a sudden her eyes got really wide and her nose started to twitch. And she went, ah, 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 and her friends jumped out of the way. And she shot that puck right into the net. And her friend said, Zimmer, what'd you do that for? And Zimmer was so happy. She was jumping up and down. And she said, well, you know, I really, 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 really wanted to score a goal. And a dragon has got to have one good trick.
What is something surprising you learned about yourself because of your art? Okay. I think some of the things that I've learned about myself are, for one, that it's important for me to listen. My ability to listen and pay attention is more important than my voice. And that, I don't know if that's surprising, but I think it's the most valuable thing I've learned, is how important it is to listen and pay attention with my ears, but also with all of my senses. And one of the things about me is that I have fairly high anxiety, and I have a lot of difficulty leaving the house, and I have a lot of difficulty getting on the stage. And sometimes I think, is this still worth it to get on the stage? But the turning point is that one or two words into a story, I'm in the safest place in the world for me. And so I guess I'm supposed to be there.
I love that. So when you find yourself in a space and you look out at the audience, who is your audience?
My audience is everyone, because story is part of who we are as human beings. And it doesn't matter if we speak or we draw or we sign, we have a way to share our stories. And so my audiences in a lot of cases are children. I do a lot of storytelling in schools and libraries. I also tell stories in bars. I tell stories in seniors' lodges. I work with new Canadians quite often. And there's something that's so amazing about listening and telling stories in those communities. Story is everywhere. Story belongs everywhere. I've been on festival stages at folk music festivals and, before a rock band, and I've been on a street corner, and story belongs everywhere. So my audience is everyone.
How do you take care of your audience?
I think audiences deserve the utmost respect. And I know how precious time is. That's the only thing we can't get more of. No matter how hard we try, we can't get more time. It's always slipping away from us. And so one of the things that I do is I make sure I bring my best self every single time I'm in front of an audience. And it doesn't mean that I'm not hurting or sick when I'm in front of an audience, but it means that I am going to give every audience every ounce of what I have in my soul, in my body, in my heart, to try to make a connection. I think that I pay attention to the audiences. I listen to the audiences. I can read an audience. I can find those people who take care of me. Those people, you in every audience, there are those people that are sitting there and they are giving you this warmth. And so it's a communication. So we take care of each other.
Drunk girls. Drunk girls are the gods' most precious creatures. They shine brightly in the bar's washroom when your day is long and your hair is gray. They tell you you are pretty, even when you don't feel it, even though they don't want to take you home, even though there is nothing to gain. Drunk girls will compliment your shoes and offer you their lipstick, the lipstick they keep warm in their bra, so the color will bring out your cheekbones. Drunk girls will trust you with a secret. They will describe a crush and reveal a hope to dance. They will trust you to hold their drink, the one they brought to the bathroom, because they know they can't trust everyone. Drunk girls will grin wide with eyes closed. They will laugh with a mouth wide open. They will melt to tears. Drunk girls feel. They feel love and pain and pleasure. Drunk girls will trust you if you take their hand and hold their weight on the dance floor. Drunk girls will trust you like a child would. They are what is left of the little girl inside. They will ask if they can hug you and hold you tight. Drunk girls are the gods' most perfect angels, to be held high and protected as they offer up truths. Drunk girls know they can't always trust themselves to not forget anything. So they carry their house keys, ID, and cab fare in their boots. Drunk girls leave their car at home and will trust you if you offer them a ride. Drunk girls' foreheads should be kissed safely on the doorstep. Their numbers should be taken with the intention to really call. They should be asked if a peck on the cheek would be all right, or if you can stroke their hair. Drunk girls' safety should be paramount. Drunk girls let up their magic, and they will give you all they have. Their last cigarette, their keys, the leftovers they plan to have for lunch the next day. Drunk girls will trust you will love them, will trust you with their bodies. They will cry the next day when you don't text and their head is pounding. They will cry in 2 weeks when they don't bleed. They will cry in 2 months when you grab their ass in another bar, not knowing about their trip to the doctor. They will go to the bathroom where the drunk girls will tell them that they are pretty and compliment their shoes.
I like that. So thinking about community, then what does community mean to you?
Community is really important. As a storyteller, when I started out, I spent about 10 to 12 years as a professional storyteller before I met any other storytellers. I knew other writers and I felt connected to them, but when I started to meet other storytellers, it opened up my world in another way. And I think that so much of what we do as creators of story, as writers, as poets, as storytellers, we do in that space that's so very solitary, and we're by ourselves. And many of us are very, very introverted, but we still find strength in each other and in creating moments of hospitality and welcoming. I am one of the kind of people who goes to as many readings and events as I can. And if I have somebody's book and I've heard them read from it, I can keep their voice in my head. So when I'm reading that story later on, months, sometimes even years from now, I can have that little piece of community with me, even if I'm sitting on my own couch in my own living room. And so those moments where we can make connections, where we can be in the room listening and telling, are so very important. I do things like what you're doing right now, where I interview writers, and I'm one of these people that also finds that there's a contagion, there's an infectiousness when someone is excited about their work. And so by listening to somebody talk about their new project or their new book, and that joy and that love and that excitement, it just makes me want to be a better creator. And so there's so many wonderful moments that I come into knowing how important community is, and just having moments where we get together as community, as conferences, with the Saskatchewan Writers Guild, with the Storytellers of Canada, with tonight it's poetry, with all of these wonderful spaces, the Saskatoon Storytellers Guild, all of these wonderful spaces that I have friends that I feel like they're spaces where I can be myself and I can support others that are further, earlier on their journey, but also further along on the journey, because we have energy as writers and creators where sometimes we feel really good about where we're at, and sometimes we need a little love from the people who are around us.
The Blue Bowl. Dandelion bright scrambles in the sky blue bowl, set in the center of the oak table for me. How, Grandma, how do you get the eggs so bright? A wink and a whisper to the city girl. Butter, real butter. I browned the butter first. I mixed up the eggs and they scrambled, but I could never get my eggs that golden. I tried with real butter, browned it, burned it. I missed the chickens running, free to pick weeds. The smell of Grandma's bread drifting to the raspberry patch. Honey dripping to my elbow, too far for my tongue to reach. Sausage, salty and fat, soup, rich and thick, filled with all that will make you grow big and strong. Until she'd made 1,000 meals too many, put away pots and spoons, knives and salt, treasures marked with masking tape, and black felt pens. My uncle claims the silver and the crystal. My sister takes the painting from the wall. Mine is melamine, the blue bowl.
I'm really excited by this idea of like a library of voices in my head of hearing other writers or like yourself, seeing you speak. Do you engage in any other art besides writing and performing?
I do. One of my other favorite art forms, and I dabble in a lot of different things, but I've also been a professional face painter for 20 years. And that's something that a lot of times you see people and it's like the slapdash method, and you see all these dirty sponges and icky water and the whole bit. And I'm very safe, but the other thing is that there's something that's really special about it. And there's a moment that's sacred to me when someone sits in front of me on a chair and you touch their face, because it's an intimate thing and it's a safety thing. And I've gone through a lot of time in my life where I haven't liked my face and I haven't liked my scars. And so when I get to be the artist and painting on the cheek of a papery senior or a shiny little beautiful child, and I painted faces all over the province in all kinds of communities, and there's just such a moment of respect that's created when you touch somebody's face and you help them to feel, I don't know, it's not beautiful, but you help them to feel that they have that moment where you're giving them attention. And when I turn that mirror around and you show them the little bit of something that doesn't change their face, but it just accentuates something, and they're now a butterfly or a spider or a tiger or a monster, and there's this shiny delight that happens. It's really special to me. So that's one of my other favorite art forms. I love a lot of things.
I love that. I love that you talk a lot about like respect and really like seeing the person or hearing the art or communicating your art through that. And I'm curious, like, what are some of the topics that you write about or that you tell stories about? I'm assuming everything?
Everything. Yeah. I have a really broad range of subject material. I write a lot of stories about the women in my life. So there's a lot of stories about my grandmother, some of my teachers, poetry about them. Also things that are pulled way out of the imagination. I have a story about a mermaid who is seducing a farm boy in a field in Saskatchewan. My imagination is an incredible gift to me, but all of my stories have those elements of memory, of imagination. Some of them are horror stories or love stories, and some things are funny and some things are sad. And I think that I'm just really lucky that those gifts of those ideas have come to me, and I've been smart enough to jot them down. And I carry a notebook with me everywhere I go, because I know that if my memory isn't good enough, that if I don't write it down, somebody else is going to get that story. It's not meant for me. So I have notebooks full of little lines, pieces of dialogue, little bits and pieces that maybe someday will become a story.
So stories come from all sorts of places, sometimes from the tiniest little things, sometimes something as simple as a button. Well, my grandma, she didn't have lots of toys. She didn't have stacks of books, trucks, teddy bears, and dolls. But she had everything to make her heart sing. She had a button on a string. Zing, zing, zing. Well, my grandma, she didn't have lots of toys. She didn't have stacks of books, trucks, teddy bears, and dolls. But she had everything to make her heart sing. She had a button on a string. Zing, zing, zing. Stories come from everywhere, even something as simple as a button.
What are some things that you've done that have enabled you to be a better storyteller or artist?
I guess listening to other people tell stories, just being a member of community and a member of society and paying attention and looking at what's going on in the world. And if I miss something, realizing that I still can learn and that I'm older than a lot of people who are in the different art forms that I'm in. And I've traveled all over Saskatchewan as a touring artist in a van with people 20, 30 years younger than me. And they start off thinking, oh, she's old. And then they realize that I'm okay. And I learn from everybody. And when I started working in libraries, I was doing children's story time in a very, very small town. And I started off with this idea that I had the schedule and I had I had what we were going to do that day. And I had this little guy who would come in and he was about 3 years old. He was tiny for 3 and he had a round face and big brown eyes. And he would bop in and he would have a story for me. And I learned that I had to step back, and it wasn't just about the stories I was going to tell or read. I had to give space for everybody to have that moment where they could tell a story. And Ben would bop in, and he had stories about how there were bears in the yard, and he was chasing them up a tree and punching them out of the trees. It was wonderful. And I've worked with people from 0 to 103 years old, and I think that it's been really important for me as an artist to know that everybody has a story, and we're just so lucky when we get to experience other people's stories.
That's beautiful. We have time for one more thought, and I was wondering if you could share anything that you want to talk about, or something you wish I asked you, or anything like that.
I think people just have to know that they have a story, and every story is important. And if we're missing those bits and pieces because someone is too scared to tell their story or paint their picture or do some beading or gardening, we're missing out on something that's a beautiful part of what we can have as community. So I think we just have to encourage each other and love each other and walk forward and hold hands as we're going when we're allowed to hold hands again. But, keep each other safe. And that's really important to me.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Danica.
Thanks, Kat.
Awesome. This has been Prairie People's Poetry with me, Cat Abenstein, as your host. Thanks to Danica Lorer for her work, and thanks to you for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and check out the other videos in our series. And be sure to let us know what you think. Thanks for supporting Prairie Poetry.